Forbes, we have Twitter, and then, after our two speakers, we have a closing keynote from CMO of Pernod Ricard and the President of the World Federation of Advertisers, Martin Ryan. So, a fantastic three speakers to end day one. So, I'd like to introduce our first speaker as, perhaps to spare his blushes, one of the founding fathers of the native advertising revolution that's going on in the industry today. Vorkin is a journalist by trade, but effectively invented a new economics of publishing, a new business model, which was acquired by Forbes and incorporated into their business. He is the head of content for Forbes Media. Please could you give a warm welcome to Mr. Vorkin.
Thank you, Charlie. If I were the founding father of native advertising, I'd probably be 100 years older than I am right now, largely because so much of what I'm going to talk about actually began with companies like Michelin and John Deere 100 years ago. We've all heard the Michelin Guide, and we've all heard, we probably haven't heard of The Furrow, which is a magazine that John Deere started. That was all about content marketing. But before I get to that, I want to talk about everything that Charlie talked about or mentioned. And it starts with, as we've changed, that's VC Forbes right there. He had an idea, and the idea was aspiration, entrepreneurial capitalism. People wanted to succeed. That worked for a really, really long time. Then this is what happened. Journalism started to collide with digital publishing. It changed everything. It changed. Anybody could publish anytime, anywhere. We all know that. Digital publishing then collided with social media. That became a completely other change that meant editors no longer controlled anything. Actually, their friends did through the social media platforms. Then, what's happening now is social media is colliding with mobile, and that really is the state of play, and that is a great focus. Now, all that's happened, and let me give you some big thoughts on what that means. Journalism, marketing, and PR are converging. A lot of my colleagues will think that's blasphemy to say that that's what's happening, and we'll get into that. There's increasingly one single conversation because of that, with many voices participating in that conversation. The audience, journalists, and marketers. One conversation, three voices that previously were placed into silos are now all in one place on the digital screen. Yesterday I went to see the Pope at noon. He came out of his window and reminded me that church versus state still exists here in Rome, but in the world of editorial and advertising, it's really not church versus state anymore. It's about transparency. Those are words I use, transparency. That is something that is vastly difficult for many of my colleagues to appreciate. The economics of journalism are broken, and they need to be fixed, and that's what we're trying to do. The century-old processes of producing journalism are broken with them, and they need to be changed. Now, what does that mean? That means audiences, they want great content, and they simply don't care where the content is from. That content could be from journalists, that content could be from their friends, that content can be from marketers. There's only one thing today's audience demands, that is identified, clearly labeled, clearly transparent, who is speaking. That's the information they want, and it needs to be good. So, this is Peter Drucker, and probably one of the greatest management gurus ever. That quote right there really says everything about what needs to happen, and certainly about what Forbes is doing. And I'm going to read it. The mission says why you do what you do, not the means by which you do it. Our mission is the same. The mission of journalism is the same. The mission of Forbes is the same. We decided to change the means by how we do journalism. And that's what we can talk about, and that is what brought us to what's now called native advertising. In changing the means of what we do and how we do it, we've absolutely changed the culture of publishing. It's been a complete DNA change for us, and which others are going to face as well. So what have we done to change that culture, and what are you going to see more of? Because I can read you from the New York Times, the Financial Times, or the Guardian, all the journalistic enterprises that are slowly changing what they do. We've turned the content model upside down, which we'll talk about. We've changed our labor model. We've changed our compensation model. And we've changed the advertising model. That's all work for us in how we're changing the economics of journalism and how we're enabling our audience to receive messages from their friends, from journalists, and from marketers as well. Now, why are we doing all this? Why does journalism need to do all this? Because we believe in advertising-supported journalism, and we need to find a way to pay for it. And native advertising and enabling marketers to publish on a credible platform is what we believe in and what is helping us maintain a sustainable model for advertising-supported journalism. Now let's get back to the mission of journalism. For everybody, the essential mission of journalism is simple. It's to inform. It's also to observe. It is to collect. And it is to interpret. And I will add, all that happens with biases. Conscious or not, there are biases. The media business has sat or shielded itself behind objectivity for a very long time. For 100 years, it's observed, collected, interpreted, with all the biases, conscious or not, that entails. Once you recognize that, and once you're clearly transparent and you identify who's speaking, you're able to do so many different things in the world of media that many media players wouldn't do. Now, to do all that, you need to build the tools. Whether it's we building the tools, or Twitter building the tools, or other folks building the tools, you need to build the tools to publish. And once you build those tools, you need to create a platform. And in that platform, you're giving everybody the opportunity to say something. So, what's our model? Now, pay careful attention to this, because this says 1,300 contributors. 1,300 contributors publishing under their own name and their own brand. They aggregate an audience. It's a disaggregated audience out there now. They are aggregating an audience. They publish under their own name, with their expertise, and audiences attach themselves to them. That's when we say content is content. Content is content as long as it's fully labeled and fully transparent. That's very clear. That's a face of a Forbes staff member or a face of a Forbes contributor. Now, there are all the brands that have used the same tools as that Forbes staffer to publish on Forbes.com. There's that person again identified. We identify the program and we identify the marketer. Clearly labeled. One scalable page for a marketer, one scalable page for a journalist, one scalable page for a contributor, all the same, fully identified. They are on the same platform, talking with each other. They have the tools to publish within their area of expertise, whatever they choose to publish. So our program, what's happened? We've had a few score of publishers publishing thousands of posts, generating thousands of unique visitors, millions of unique visitors, and bringing on a following on Forbes. That's happening elsewhere. Now, I'll get into it, the competition is all growing. But to do that, we built a newsroom for news people, and we built a brand newsroom for brands. Okay? A brand newsroom for brands. We guide them, we aid them, we help them to publish their content. The same skill sets that we help our journalists with, we help our brand voice partners with. 2 kinds of newsrooms. One reports to me, the other reports to the Chief Revenue Officer. Now, this is what's happening now. 66% of this category of people, 24 to 49-year-old men, are doing all their social on mobile. Think about that, all their social on mobile. 75% of women, 35 to 49, are doing all their social on mobile. That is where native advertising, journalism, audience participation is all melding into one. Right there, on that mobile phone, on those social platforms. So, what does a brand voice, what does a native advertiser person need to understand when they publish? They need to be timely. This is not about debating what should we do, and you spend a week creating it, and then another week editing it. It needs to be done now. Audiences respond to the now. So native advertising needs to be about the now. It needs to be relevant. There are many brands that have agendas. There are an audience that has an agenda. The brand needs to become closer to the audience agenda than the other way around. We see it all the time. Brands following their agenda, publishing content, getting no audience. Brands following the audience agenda, driving hundreds of thousands of page views. Timeliness and relevance. It needs to be authentic. This audience today is a very sophisticated audience. They see through a pitch very quickly. If you want to pitch in the world of native advertising, it will not work. If you want to create an authentic voice and treat people with the knowledge they know, it will work. It's pretty simple, but it's hard to do in the world of clients, talking to marketers, talking to agencies. It's a very hard thing to do, but it's critical. Engagement. You need to engage with the audience. It's absolutely critical. And what I mean by engage is you need to answer, you need to comment, you need to talk, you need to communicate. That's what people want to do today. Whether it's on platform, on a credible news site, whether it's on social, you need to do it. You cannot be afraid of it. Brands that are afraid of it are going to have issues. Consistency. We've seen this clearly. The audience loves consistency. The audience wants to know when you're going to publish. Is it once a day? Is it once a week? Is it twice a week? Is it once a month? That will also help you internally be timely. If you create that consistency internally, you will find you become much more in the audience agenda and not solely on what your agenda will be, what your agenda is as a marketer. Now, there's a lot going on in native advertising. The competition, when we first started this 4 years ago, it was pretty much us and BuzzFeed. Now, the names are everywhere. Brand Voice, Brand Post, you name it, they're out there. The Wall Street Journal, The Guardian, the Financial, I can't keep track of all the people that are doing native advertising right now. So the competition is severe in our, is really intense in our business, but the opportunities for marketers are great. Transparency. This has changed vastly over the last 2 years. 3 or 4 years ago, transparency in native advertising was one thing. Does the audience know who's talking? It needs to be clearly labeled. Now transparency is vastly different. Transparency is about visibility for marketers into the numbers. Visibility for marketers into the ROI of that content that they're publishing that's called native advertising. People are providing suites of data that you can monitor that kind of visibility in real time across Twitter, Facebook, Forbes, LinkedIn, wherever. That's what transparency means today, is visibility into those things. Content creation. In native advertising, it's all over the map. At Forbes, we want the marketer to publish and create the content. We believe that's the most authentic. Others who are practicing native advertising are basically creating custom publishing units to do it for the marketer. That's great, because a lot of marketers don't have the resources, a lot of marketers don't have the skill set, and many publishers are going to provide that. In my mind, it doesn't carry the same authenticity as having people within your company do it. We have about a half a dozen partners who actually have created their own internal newsrooms already. They've hired former journalists, ex-journalists, call them what you want. I often say content marketing and native advertising is the full employment act for journalism. Because what's going to happen is that marketers are going to hire all the journalists that media companies can't afford anymore, and marketers are going to have them create the content. So you have a lot of that custom publishing going on. You have a lot of the internal newsrooms that marketers are creating, from Virgin to Intel to SAP to others. They're creating these departments. So that's what you think about with all the different options you have to publish native ads. Labeling. Let's get back to that. Labeling is a real issue in my mind because it's all over the map. Sponsored posts, paid posts, this kind of post, that kind of post, from the marketer, for the marketer. It's all over the place. It's very confusing, and you will find that the most vague or sometimes the worst things in labeling come up when the actual media organization, the journalists within the organization, are so against having any kind of publisher being able to publish in their environment next to their content. The more the journalists within the media company object, the more tortured the labeling becomes. That's what happens. It's very clear. And I think for a marketer, it becomes very important to really understand that labeling to make sure that it works best for them. Presentation. Presentation is all over the map. Forbes is a platform. A marketer's native ad content looks exactly like a contributor or staffer native ad content. On websites, it often looks like a microsite. So the native ad is in a space on a website, and the audience says, "What's this?" Because it looks like a microsite that has no relevance to the site they went to. So you go to Facebook and Twitter and others, and it's much more endemic to the flow of it, because it's a platform. You have websites where it looks very separate from the flow of the consumer experience. And we feel it needs to look very much consistent with the flow of the consumer experience. Ad networks. Just like display networks, they're cropping up. Lots of ad networks that are delivering native ad content because publishers have not built the tools and apparatus to do it themselves. So, you can go to a native ad network, and the native ad network will have a publishing platform, and you can publish your content on with their tools, and they'll distribute that content to wherever. Now, I have a problem with that, because I'm not sure what's so native about one piece of content being on 40 different platforms or websites. Because if it's native, it should be for the audience you're trying to reach on that specific platform or website, not content that is good enough for 40 different platforms or websites that aggregate maybe 100 million users. That's what native ad networks are going to do. And that's what they're doing. And that is a big trend. And oh, by the way, for the publisher, it's a challenge because it's great for marketers. It may bring the price of that native ad down for something that we believe at Forbes should be a premium product. But it also means you're going to pay less and probably have it distributed to 100 or 200 million people. That makes it far less native than it really should be. That's our view of the world. Distribution. Yes, distribution can be paid for. I see there's some sponsors here that we use to help distribute that content. We have teams that distribute across social media, but we can also buy it with some of these other kinds of networks. So you want to understand what is that paid distribution all about. The ad buy. There are many kinds of ad buys in native advertising today. We have a site license mentality. You pay a monthly fee, and you publish when you want. Others will have much more of a per post model, where you pay per post, you'll pay for this, you pay for a series of posts or whatever. All different kinds of ad buys are out there at varying different costs. Evaluation. How do you determine ROI? How do you do that? That's where it gets to the visibility of the numbers that that need to be provided. Right now, it's not the easiest thing in the world to determine the ROI on native ads. In many cases, different kinds of brand metrics or brand recognition metrics are used. But as this evolves, we'll get far, far closer to types of ROI numbers that will help you understand the world of native advertising and what it means for your brand. The players. This, I think, for me, is the most fun to watch. You have advertising agencies who are creating newsrooms to basically replace the newsrooms of media companies. And these agency newsrooms, in some cases whole floors, are creating lots of content for their clients that will be native ads or other things. So you have the agencies doing it. Then you have PR companies. PR companies want some of the agency dollars that they get from chief marketing officers. So they're now in the game of native advertising. They're going to build newsrooms. Because really, no one reads a press release anymore. But if the PR companies can create newsrooms to create the kinds of content that people do read, then they have a new economic model. They have a new reason for being. They have some challenges there because agencies really have a direct line to the chief marketing officer. Public relations companies have a direct line to the communications officer. One level of money spent is up here, one money level spent is down here, but everybody wants to play in the same space. So, you got newsrooms and agencies, you got newsrooms and PR companies, you got newsrooms and clients who may not want to pay the agencies or the PR company to do anything. It is all over the map. That's the world that we live in today with native ads. The reality is, the way we see it, the native ad content needs to be multi-platform. We do it in print, we do it in desktop, we do it in tablet, through an app, or we do it in a browser. The native ad content is simply all over the place. And I actually personally believe the greatest place for native advertising to appear is on the mobile phone. Because the mobile phone is a very simple device, and the user is only interested in a single thing in the news business on a mobile phone. What's the headline? What is the headline? If I'm interested in the headline, I click, no matter who is providing the content, as long as I know it's labeled. A headline on mobile from a news service or a news agency or Forbes looks exactly like a headline, native ad headline, just labeled so, and the user does not care if they're interested in that. So what I believe you're going to see is a great blending of native advertising content on the cell phone that's both headlines that links to text and headlines that links to video, and that is going to be the game as we move forward. So that's where it is in the world of native advertising, and I welcome questions, and I hope there are.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Vorkin.